My phone vibrated violently against the mahogany wood of my office desk, the harsh buzzing sound shattering the quiet focus of my morning. The caller ID flashed brightly on the screen. Robert. My dad. I stared at the flashing letters for several long seconds, listening to the faint, steady hum of the air conditioning vent above my head. I knew exactly where he was calling from. I had memorized their flight schedule weeks ago. It was departure day. I slowly picked up the phone, taking a deep breath to steady my racing heart, and pressed it to my ear. I kept my voice completely flat, stripping away any trace of the anxiety that used to choke me whenever he called. Hello, Dad. Mason, what the hell is going on? His voice didn't just boom through the speaker. It vibrated with the kind of military-grade fury I had feared my entire childhood. In the background, behind his shouting, I could clearly hear the distinct, chaotic sounds of O'Hare International Airport, the rhythmic clicking of rolling suitcases over tile floors, the muffled, echoing intercom announcements overhead. We are standing at the check-in desk, my dad growled, his breath hitting the receiver in sharp, angry bursts. And the agent behind the counter is telling us we have economy tickets, not first class. They are looking at us like we are a bunch of scam artists trying to bluff our way into the VIP lounge. Fix this right now. I leaned back in my heavy leather chair, turning slowly to look out the massive floor-to-ceiling window at the sprawling Chicago skyline. The sky was a brilliant, clear blue. There is no mistake, Dad, I replied, my tone even and cold. I made some adjustments to the reservations. Dead silence fell over the other end of the line. For a fleeting moment, the only sound was a distant boarding announcement calling for final passengers to Tokyo. Then the inevitable explosion happened. You did what? How dare you change the travel arrangements without telling us? We are standing here in our best clothes, and we look like absolute fools. I am sorry you feel embarrassed, I replied, feeling an icy, satisfying calm wash over my entire body. It was a calm that took 32 years of mistreatment, manipulation, and financial abuse to build. But as you explicitly said to me last month, Dad, gifts once given belong to the recipient. You decided to change who was going on this trip without my consent. So, I decided to change what kind of trip it would be. This is completely unacceptable, he sputtered, his voice cracking with rage. You fix this right now, Mason, or there will be serious, permanent consequences for your relationship with this family. I gripped the phone tightly, feeling the phantom weight of the $26,000 I had bled for, the weight of missed weekends, of skipped meals, of a lifetime spent desperately trying to buy my father's respect. I think those consequences already happened, Dad. They happened the moment you looked me in the eye and decided Isabella was more deserving of my place than I was. Enjoy economy class. I hear the middle seats back by the lavatories are particularly tight this time of year. I hung up the phone and set it face down on my desk. Before I tell you about the absolute disaster that awaited them when they landed in Dubai, and the ultimate karma that destroyed their little fantasy, tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Thank you for being here. Grab a warm glass of water, sit down, and listen to me tell the rest of this story. I grew up in a house where the rules applied strictly to me, but all the rewards magically flowed to my older brother, Carter. I am 32 years old now, working as a senior finance manager at a massive corporate investment firm here in downtown Chicago. I have a six-figure salary, I own my house, and I have a solid, growing investment portfolio. But let me be entirely clear, absolutely none of that came from family help. Came from pure, unfiltered survival instincts. My dad, Robert, is a retired military officer. For as long as I can remember, he ran our suburban house exactly like a military barracks. Beds had to be made with hospital corners, chores had to be executed with precision, and disobedience was met with shouting. But his legendary strictness had a massive, glaring blind spot, and that blind spot was Carter. Carter is 3 years older than me, and by the time I was halfway through high school, it was painfully obvious that he was completely allergic to responsibility. He dropped out of 2 different universities, complaining that the professors were out to get him. He bounced from one entry-level sales job to another, always armed with a convenient excuse about why his boss was toxic or the market was too tough. And yet, in my dad's eyes, Carter was the golden boy who could do no wrong. If Carter managed to hold down a job selling gym memberships for 6 consecutive months, my dad would take him out for a steak dinner and brag loudly to the neighbors about his incredible work ethic. If I brought home a high school report card with 5 A's and a single B, my dad would sit me down at the kitchen table for an hour, intensely interrogating me about why I was slacking off and wasting my potential. My mom, Martha, was the ultimate peacekeeper. She hated conflict of any kind. If my dad yelled, she shrunk into the background. If my dad praised Carter, she clapped along with a tight smile. She never once stood up to him, not even when the disparity between us became financially devastating. When Carter was 22, he completely drained the college fund my parents had meticulously set up for him. He used a massive chunk of it to travel through Europe with his fraternity brothers, claiming he desperately needed to find himself before entering the corporate world. When I graduated high school a year later and nervously asked about my half of the college fund, my dad sat me down with a stern, unyielding look. He told me that building character meant paying my own way, and that a real man doesn't ask for handouts. So I took out crippling student loans. I worked a grueling graveyard shift at a logistics warehouse, sorting heavy packages until 3 in the morning, and then dragged myself to my finance classes at 8 in the morning. I survived on cheap ramen noodles and wore thrift store clothes for 4 years. When Carter got into a messy, dramatic situation with a girl in his late 20s, it somehow escalated into a bitter custody battle over a golden retriever they had adopted together. My parents immediately panicked and hired an expensive lawyer for him. They eagerly dipped into their own retirement savings to pay the mounting legal fees just so Carter wouldn't be overly stressed. When I needed a tiny $200 loan to cover an unexpected medical bill during my first year in the corporate world, my dad gave me a harsh lecture on financial planning. Even at my grandfather's funeral, while I handled the catering and supported my grieving mother, my dad spent the entire afternoon comforting Carter. I was just the invisible workhorse. 2 years ago, I was sitting in my office looking at a calendar when I realized my parents' 40th wedding anniversary was rapidly approaching. 40 years of marriage is a massive, undeniable milestone. Despite all the hurt and the blatant favoritism, a part of me still desperately craved their validation. My parents had never traveled outside the United States. My dad always loudly claimed that international travel was a frivolous waste of money, but my mom used to watch travel documentaries on public television with this incredibly sad, wistful look in her eyes, silently dreaming of places she thought she would never see. I decided right then and there that I was going to do something completely unprecedented. I was going to give them a trip they would never, ever forget. I wanted to definitively show them that their younger son, the one they made pay his own way, the one they dismissed, had become wildly successful. I wanted to finally hear my dad say he was proud of me. I chose Dubai. It had absolutely everything. Unparalleled luxury, impeccable safety, incredible modern architecture, and a completely different culture that would blow their minds. I didn't want them doing a cheap, budget tourist run on crowded buses. I wanted first-class everything. To pull this off without going into debt, I needed $26,000. I immediately set up a dedicated, high-yield savings account. For 18 brutal months, I ground myself down to the bone at work. I was fiercely competing for a major promotion to senior director. My main rival was a guy named Aaron, an absolute shark of a coworker who tried to steal my top clients and take credit for my financial models at every turn. I worked 80-hour weeks just to outmaneuver him, poring over spreadsheets until my vision blurred. I finally managed to impress our CEO, Lincoln, by independently restructuring a failing, high-risk asset portfolio that saved the firm millions. When bonus season finally hit, Lincoln called me into his office and handed me an envelope. The promotion was mine, and the salary increase was substantial. More importantly, the bonus check inside that envelope was massive. That bonus, combined with 18 months of aggressive, disciplined saving from my regular paychecks, finally hit the $26,000 target. I worked exclusively with a high-end luxury travel agent named Dylan. Together, we built a masterpiece of an itinerary. I booked 4 first-class tickets on Emirates, complete with lay-flat beds and onboard showers. I reserved 2 massive, opulent suites at the Burj Al Arab, a hotel so fancy it is often referred to as a 7-star property. I booked a private, sunset desert safari in a vintage Land Rover, complete with a private chef cooking under the stars. I booked a private yacht cruise around the Palm Jumeirah. I even arranged for VIP, skip-the-line access to the observation deck of the Burj Khalifa. I deliberately included Carter in the booking. Despite everything he had put me through, he was still my brother. I naively figured a family trip of this incredible magnitude might finally bring us together and erase the resentment. I wanted us all sitting on a yacht in the warm Persian Gulf, putting the painful past behind us for good. I sacrificed my own life for this dream. I drove a battered 10-year-old sedan while my colleagues bought luxury cars. I skipped weekend trips to the lake with friends. I poured my literal blood, sweat, and tears into funding this grand gesture, desperate for a moment of family unity. When everything was completely finalized and fully paid for, I presented the gift during a traditional Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The house smelled strongly of my mom's famous pot roast and roasted vegetables, a comforting scent from my childhood. I had asked Dylan, my travel agent, to print the intricate itineraries on heavy, expensive cardstock with beautiful gold embossing. I placed the thick documents inside elegant black envelopes and casually handed them out as my mom was serving coffee after dessert. My mom opened hers first. She carefully adjusted her reading glasses, sliding her finger under the flap of the envelope. I watched her hands start to tremble violently as she scanned the heavy paper, her eyes darting back and forth across the lavish details. She slowly looked up at me, her eyes completely brimming with tears that threatened to spill over. "Mason, is this real?" she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. I smiled, feeling a massive lump form in my own throat. "Happy anniversary, Mom. Happy anniversary, Dad. We are all going to Dubai." My dad picked up his itinerary next. His thick eyebrows furrowed in that familiar, suspicious way, as if he was searching the fine print for the catch. "First-class flights? The Burj Al Arab? Mason, this must have cost an absolute fortune. You shouldn't be spending this kind of money. Don't worry about the cost for a single second, Dad," I said, my heart pounding loudly in my chest. "It is my gift to you. You both earned it. Everything is fully paid for." Carter, sitting across from me, was staring at his paper with his mouth literally hanging open. "Wait, a private yacht? Bro, are you serious right now?" "Completely serious," I nodded, feeling an overwhelming rush of happiness. "I already cleared the time off with my firm. We leave in exactly 6 months. My mom abruptly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. She practically ran around the table and wrapped her arms around my neck, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. But as amazing as her reaction was, it was my dad's reaction that truly hit me the hardest. He set the heavy paper down on the table, took a deep breath, and looked me dead in the eye. His usually rigid, stern expression completely softened, revealing the older man beneath the military exterior. "This is incredibly generous of you, Mason," my dad said, his gruff voice thick with a genuine, undeniable emotion I had never heard before. "Thank you. I am proud of the man you have become." Hearing those exact words out loud, finally directed at me after over 3 decades of waiting, felt like a physical weight lifting off my chest. 18 months of grueling corporate stress, years of feeling second best, the endless nights eating ramen. All of it completely vanished in that one powerful sentence. I had finally done it. I had finally proven my worth to the man who mattered most. We spent the next hour happily talking about the trip details. My mom was already excitedly planning out her wardrobe, wondering if she needed to buy a new evening gown. Carter was enthusiastically talking about the pictures he was going to take for his social media. It was utterly perfect. It was the absolute happiest, most united I had ever seen my family in my entire life. And then, Right in the middle of our laughter, the front doorbell rang loudly, shattering the perfect moment. Carter immediately jumped up from his chair, a goofy grin spreading across his face. "Oh, that has to be Isabella. I texted her earlier and told her to come by for coffee and pie." Isabella was Carter's brand new girlfriend. They had only been dating for about 4 months. She was 28 years old, worked part-time as a receptionist at a high-end downtown boutique, and from everything I had briefly observed, she treated my brother like a walking, talking wallet. She breezed into the dining room a moment later, her eyes darting rapidly around the room, instantly taking in the scene, the empty dessert plates, and the heavy black envelopes on the table. "Hi everyone, what are we celebrating?" she asked, putting on a sickeningly sweet, high-pitched voice. Carter eagerly grabbed his gold-embossed itinerary and shoved it toward her. "Babe, look at this. Mason is taking us all to Dubai for Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary. We are flying first class." I watched Isabella's face very closely. The polite, sweet smile completely vanished for a split second, replaced by a look of sheer, naked, calculating greed. Her perfectly manicured fingers traced the paper, and her eyes widened dramatically as she scanned the words first class and private yacht. She slowly looked up at me, and I swear I could actually see dollar signs reflecting in her dark pupils. "Dubai?" she gasped, dramatically clutching her chest as if she might faint. "Oh my God. That is literally my ultimate dream. All my favorite lifestyle influencers go to Dubai. The luxury shopping there is supposed to be absolutely incredible." She didn't miss a beat. She immediately pulled up a wooden chair and wedged herself right next to my dad. "Mason, wow, you must make so much money to afford something like this. What exactly is your salary? Are you fully paying for Carter too?" "It is a family gift," I said neutrally, deliberately keeping my tone flat to ignore her wildly invasive questions about my personal finances. For the rest of the evening, Isabella completely dominated the conversation. She aggressively asked about the hotel's spa amenities. She asked if the private desert chef could accommodate a strict raw vegan diet. What disgusted me most was that she didn't say, "That sounds so fun for you guys." She kept intentionally using the word we. "We should definitely go to the Dubai Mall," she chirped. "We really need to book a professional desert photo shoot." I caught my dad looking at her with an amused, approving smile. My mom just kept nodding politely. I felt a cold, heavy knot forming deep in my stomach. 2 weeks later, I was grabbing a quick espresso downtown when I unexpectedly ran into Julian. Julian was an old college buddy of mine, and incidentally, he was Isabella's ex-boyfriend. We sat down at a small corner table for a quick catch-up. When I casually mentioned that my brother Carter was dating Isabella, Julian actually choked on his latte, coughing loudly into his napkin. "Isabella? As in, Isabella who used to work at the Contemporary Art Gallery?" Julian asked, his face turning visibly pale. "Yeah, that's her." I nodded, my curiosity piqued. Julian leaned aggressively across the small table, lowering his voice. "Mason, you need to warn your brother right now. That girl is an absolute parasite. When we broke up last year, she completely lost her mind. She falsely tried to claim common-law marriage just to get half my savings. She threatened to hire a vicious divorce lawyer to ruin my life, even though we were barely living together in a rented apartment. She squeezed me for every single dime I had before she finally moved on. She is utterly obsessed with status and money." Exactly 2 months before our scheduled departure to Dubai, Carter called a mandatory, urgent family meeting at my parents' house. He stood nervously in the center of the living room, tightly holding Isabella's hand, and loudly announced that they were officially engaged. Isabella squealed and aggressively shoved her left hand into my face. Sitting heavy on her ring finger was a massive, blindingly sparkling diamond ring. Even with my limited knowledge of jewelry, it easily looked like a flawless 3-carat stone. Knowing Carter's disastrous financial situation, he currently worked an hourly wage at a mall cell phone kiosk. There was absolutely zero mathematical chance he bought that expensive ring on his own. I offered my congratulations, forcefully pasting a fake, tight smile on my face to keep the peace. But as I leaned in to hug my mom, I noticed something glaringly wrong. For as long as I could remember, every single day of her life, my mom wore a heavy vintage gold necklace. It was a priceless family heirloom passed down from her grandmother, and it was her most prized, treasured possession. Today, her neck was completely bare. "Mom, where's your gold necklace?" I asked quietly, pulling her aside when Carter and Isabella were distracted by taking selfies with the ring. My mom immediately looked away, her cheeks flushing a deep, embarrassed crimson. "Oh, it's just at the jeweler's right now. Being cleaned," she stammered, refusing to meet my eyes. I knew instantly. My stomach dropped. She hadn't taken it to be cleaned. She had pawned it. She had secretly pawned her own grandmother's irreplaceable heirloom to fund her golden child's ridiculous engagement ring for a woman she barely knew. Later that afternoon, the extended family came over for a casual backyard barbecue to celebrate the engagement. My Uncle Gabriel was there. Gabriel was my dad's younger brother, a loud, obnoxious guy who loved spreading family gossip more than he loved breathing. I was standing by the grill, flipping burgers in the smoke, when Gabriel sidled up right next to me holding a cheap beer. "So, Mason," Gabriel smirked, aggressively clapping me on the shoulder. "I hear business downtown is absolutely booming for you. Robert was just telling me you pulled in a massive corporate bonus this year. Said it was more than enough to easily fund a luxury Middle Eastern vacation for the whole family." I froze, the spatula completely still in my hand. "Dad told you about my financial bonus?" "Oh yeah," Gabriel laughed loudly, taking a swig of his beer. "He was bragging about it to everyone down at the country club last week, saying his youngest son makes more money than the doctors in the neighborhood." Isabella was right there listening to the whole thing, too. She chimed in and said Carter is so incredibly lucky to have a brother with such deep pockets and a massive future inheritance. My blood ran absolutely cold. Isabella knew. She fully knew I had serious money. She knew my parents would blindly bend over backward and sacrifice their own possessions for Carter. And she knew exactly how much that $26,000 vacation was worth. Gabriel, desperately trying to play the friendly, gossiping uncle, had just unwittingly painted a massive, glowing target right on my back. The casual backyard barbecue eventually transitioned indoors into a formal sit-down dinner, which quickly devolved into a hijacking session for the Dubai trip. We were just 8 weeks out from the flight. I had my laptop open on the edge of the dining table, quietly confirming passport numbers and expiration dates with my mom. Isabella sat directly across from me, aggressively scrolling through her phone. "So Mason," she said loudly, raising her voice to ensure the entire table stopped talking and listened to her. "I was closely reviewing the itinerary you printed out. I noticed you only booked one luxury suite with 2 bedrooms for Carter and me to share with your parents. Now that we are officially engaged, we really need our own private romance space. Can you go ahead and upgrade us to the royal suite? I saw pictures online and it looks gorgeous." I slowly stopped typing, my fingers hovering rigidly over the keyboard. I looked up and met her calculating gaze. "Isabella, the hotel reservations are strictly for 4 people. Mom, Dad, Carter, and me. There is no us suite. The bookings are 100% finalized and locked in." The entire dining room went dead, suffocatingly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Isabella's face instantly contorted into a masterful mask of wounded, innocent shock. She looked over at Carter, her eyes rapidly welling up with perfectly timed, fake tears. "Carter," she whimpered, her lower lip literally trembling. "I thought you promised me this was a welcoming family trip. Aren't I officially part of the family now?" Carter immediately slammed his fist hard on the wooden table, rattling the silverware. "Yeah, Mason, what the hell is your problem? She is my fiancée now. She is coming to Dubai with us. The trip is fully booked and completely paid for." "Carter," I said, keeping my voice dangerously level despite the rage boiling inside me. "Adding a 5th person this late in the game, especially for Emirates first class and a 7-star luxury hotel, would cost at least another $5,000 or $6,000 out of pocket. I do not have that kind of cash just lying around. My dad cleared his throat from the head of the table. It was the distinct, authoritative sound of a judge about to deliver a harsh sentence. Now hold on a minute, Mason. Carter actually has a very good point. Isabella is joining our family. It would be incredibly rude and insulting to leave her behind here in Chicago while we go celebrate our anniversary overseas. You make excellent money. You just got that big promotion. Surely you can just put the extra costs on a high-limit credit card and make some quick adjustments. I stared at my dad, utterly stunned by his audacity. Dad, I spent 18 agonizing months saving every penny for this. I delayed fixing the leaking roof on my own house. I gave up my entire social life for a year and a half. I cannot just magically invent another $6,000 because Carter impulsively decided to get engaged. Isabella immediately reached over and placed her hand gently on my dad's arm. Oh, Robert, please don't fight with Mason over me. I don't want to be a financial burden. I've never been out of the country. I thought this would be the perfect, magical way to bond with my new parents. But if Mason really hates me that much, I will just stay home all alone. It was an absolute masterclass in emotional manipulation. My dad's jaw tightened in anger. We will discuss this in private later, he said to me, his tone laced with a dark, undeniable warning. I left the house that night feeling physically sick to my stomach. Exactly 4 weeks before our scheduled flight to Dubai, my dad summoned me to the house. He didn't ask if I was free. He gave me an absolute order to be there at 6 o'clock sharp. When I walked through the front door and stepped into the living room, the heavy atmosphere made it feel exactly like an ambush. My dad was sitting stiffly in his large leather armchair. My mom was perched nervously on the very edge of the sofa, wringing her hands. Carter and Isabella sat uncomfortably close together on the love seat, holding hands and looking incredibly smug. Sit down, Mason, my dad commanded, pointing to a hard wooden chair positioned directly in the center of the room. I slowly took the seat, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. What is this about, Dad? My dad leaned forward, resting his heavy elbows on his knees, staring me down. We have been doing a lot of serious thinking about the Dubai trip over the past few days, and we have come to a final decision. I instantly noticed the deliberate use of the word we. They were collectively making executive decisions about a luxury trip that I had completely funded with my own blood and sweat. Given the strict logistical limitations you aggressively mentioned, my dad continued, his voice completely devoid of any paternal warmth, about the reservations being strictly capped at 4 people, and your refusal to cover the excessive cost to add a 5th ticket. We think the most sensible, logical solution is for Isabella to simply take your place on the trip. The words hit me like a physical, brutal blow to the stomach. All the air rushed out of my lungs. I actually stopped breathing for a full second, staring at my father, entirely certain that my brain had misfired and somehow misunderstood his English. Excuse me, I finally choked out, my voice barely above a whisper. It makes the most logical sense, my dad pressed on, his tone rapidly hardening into an absolute military order. You travel extensively for your corporate business. You have already seen the world. Isabella has never even left the state of Illinois. This would be a completely new, eye-opening experience for her. She is about to officially become part of this family, and this trip would be the absolute perfect bonding experience for your mother and me to get to know our new daughter-in-law. I snapped my head to look at my mom. She was staring intently at the floor rug, furiously twisting her wedding ring around her finger. She absolutely refused to make eye contact with me, her silence deafening. Dad, I said, my voice shaking violently. I paid for this trip. I planned every single agonizing detail. This was my hard-earned gift to you and Mom. I worked myself to absolute death for 18 months for this. And we appreciate the thought, Mason, he replied dismissively, waving his hand in the air as if swatting away an annoying fly. But gifts, once given, legally and morally belong to the recipient. Your mother and I would like to share this luxury experience with our oldest son and his future wife. Isabella deserves to go more than you do right now. She needs to feel warmly welcomed." Carter immediately chimed in, crossing his arms defensively over his chest. "Don't be a selfish jerk, Mason. You always have to make absolutely everything about you. You always have to be the center of attention, constantly showing off your fancy salary. Let Isabella have this one nice thing. If you want to go to Dubai so badly, just buy yourself another expensive ticket next year." I sat frozen in the suffocating, heavy silence of the living room, slowly looking at the four people surrounding me. My father, a man who viewed my financial loyalty as an endless entitlement. My mother, whose cowardly silence was the sharpest, most painful knife of all. My brother, a lifelong, unapologetic leech who had never worked a hard day in his life. And Isabella, sitting right there on the love seat with a tiny, triumphant, sickening smirk playing on her lips. Something deep inside my chest finally snapped. It wasn't just a burst of anger. It was an absolute, freezing cold realization that I had wasted my entire adult life trying to win a rigged game. I had been playing by the rules of a family that was designed to exploit me from the very beginning. I stood up. My legs felt shaky and weak, but when I spoke, my voice was completely steady and resonated with a dark authority I didn't know I possessed. "Selfish?" I asked, turning my head to look directly into Carter's eyes. "You have the absolute nerve to call me selfish? I paid off your massive credit card debt when you blew your money in Vegas. I contributed $8,000 to Mom and Dad's roof repairs because you were living rent-free in their basement and couldn't chip in a dime. I sacrificed my own personal life to give this family a luxury experience. And you think I am selfish because I refused to hand my hard-earned seat to a woman who literally forced Mom to pawn her heirloom necklace just to buy a diamond ring?" Carter jumped to his feet, his face turning bright red. "Shut your mouth, Mason. You don't know what you're talking about." "Enough!" my dad roared, standing up to his full height and pointing a rigid finger at me. "I will not have you disrespecting your brother or his fiancée in my own house. Our family decision is final. Isabella is going in your place. We will write you a small check for a quarter of the trip's cost when we get back next month. Case closed." I looked at my dad, really looked at him, the man whose approval I had desperately craved for 32 years. I suddenly realized I didn't feel the need for it anymore. I just felt an overwhelming sense of pity for him. "Don't bother writing the check, Dad," I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. Isabella quickly stood up, her eyes wide with a disgusting display of fake sincerity. "Mason, please, I want you to know how much this truly means to me. I will cherish this amazing family experience forever. I am so deeply sorry if this hurts your feelings, but we are going to be siblings very soon. I hope you can find it in your big heart to forgive us for wanting to bond." I turned my head and locked eyes with her. Her vicious little smirk was still there, hiding just a millimeter behind her fake, honey-sweet apologies. "You know what, Isabella?" I said, my voice dropping to a deadly, icy calm. "You might eventually marry my brother. You might completely charm my parents out of their entire retirement funds. But you and I will never, ever be family. Not after this." I abruptly turned around and walked purposefully toward the front door. "Mason, don't you dare walk out that door," my dad shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "If you walk out right now, you are turning your back on this family." I didn't even pause. I grabbed the heavy brass handle, pulled the front door open, stepped out into the freezing Chicago air, and slammed it shut behind me with a force that shook the windows. I practically ran to my car, my hands shaking violently as I fumbled with my keys. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and the second I was enclosed in the dark silence of the vehicle, I finally broke down. I sat in my freezing car for almost an hour, sobbing until my ribs physically ached and I couldn't catch my breath. It was a profound, agonizing grieving process. I wasn't just grieving a lost, expensive vacation. I was grieving the complete death of the illusion of my family. I had finally been forced to accept the brutal, ugly truth. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much money I happily spent on them, I would never, ever be enough. I would always be the dependable workhorse, and Carter would always be the cherished prize. Around midnight, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was my best friend, Elijah. Elijah had known me since our freshman year of college. He knew my toxic family dynamic inside and out, having witnessed the blatant favoritism for over a decade. I answered the phone, my voice thick, raspy, and completely broken. "Hey man, just checking in," Elijah said brightly. "Did you show them the final itinerary with the yacht? How insanely excited are they?" I broke down crying all over again. It took me a solid 10 minutes to explain exactly what had just happened in that living room. I told him about the brutal ultimatum my dad delivered. I told him about the pawned necklace. I told him about my dad explicitly saying Isabella deserved the luxury trip more than I did. Elijah was dead silent on the other end of the line. The silence stretched on for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, his voice came through the speaker, incredibly low, focused, and fierce. "Mason, listen to me very, very carefully. They did exactly what to you? They kicked me off my own trip?" I sniffled, wiping my nose with the back of my hand. "I guess I just have to accept it and eat the cost. If I maliciously cancel the whole thing, I will just be the villain forever. They will constantly blame me for ruining their big anniversary." "Stop!" Elijah commanded sharply. "Stop right now. Do you hear yourself talking? You are still desperately trying to please people who just violently ripped your heart out and stepped on it. You planned every second of this trip. You paid for every single dime. Who is the primary contact on the actual reservations?" "I am," I said, blinking away the tears. "Everything is completely booked through my personal travel agent, Dylan. It is all firmly under my name and my corporate credit card." "Exactly," Elijah said, and I could hear a slow, dangerous smile forming in his voice. "They boldly told you that gifts belong to the recipient. Fine, let them have that logic. But you hold the keys to the castle, Mason. You are the one who actually decides what the physical gift is. I'm not saying you angrily cancel the trip and strand them. I'm saying you generously give them exactly the trip they deserve." I sat up completely straight in the driver's seat. The suffocating fog of sadness instantly began to lift from my brain, rapidly replaced by a sharp, crystal clear, blinding focus. "The reservations are fully in my name," I muttered to myself, the realization washing over me. "You hold all the cards, man," Elijah said. "Don't let them walk all over you like a doormat. They demand a free trip? Give them a free trip. Just make sure it perfectly fits the budget of a guy who got maliciously kicked to the curb." The very next morning, at exactly 8 a.m. sharp, I picked up my phone and called Dylan, my travel agent. "Dylan, it's Mason. We need to make some massive, immediate changes to the Dubai booking." "Oh, hi Mason," Dylan said cheerfully, his keyboard clicking as he pulled up my extensive file. "What's going on? We are only a few weeks out from departure. Are we adding another special dinner reservation?" "No," I said, my voice completely steady and completely devoid of emotion. "I am no longer going on the trip. My brother's new fiancée, Isabella, will be taking my place. Please officially change the name on my flight ticket to hers." "Oh wow, I'm so incredibly sorry to hear you won't be going," Dylan said, sounding genuinely disappointed. "I will make the name change right now. There is a small administrative fee for that, but it's no problem at all." "That's not all," I continued, staring blankly at my office wall. "I need you to immediately cancel the first-class Emirates flights for all 4 of them. Rebook them in standard economy, the absolute cheapest, non-refundable seats you can possibly find on the plane. Try to get them middle seats near the back if you can." Dylan completely stopped typing. The line went quiet. "Wait, you want to downgrade 4 luxury first-class international tickets to basic economy? Mason, are you sure? That is a grueling, exhausting 14-hour flight." "I am absolutely positive." "Okay." Dylan said hesitantly, the clicking resuming slowly. Done. The refund difference for that alone is massive. What about the hotel? The Burj Al Arab. Cancel it, I ordered coldly. Cancel the massive suites. Find a basic, 3-star hotel on the far outskirts of the city. Something deep in Dara. Safe but absolutely punishingly basic. No ocean views. No luxury amenities. Just 2 standard double rooms with twin beds. Mason, Dara is miles away from the glamorous tourist center. Dylan warned, his voice thick with concern. It is going to take them an hour sitting in heavy traffic just to get to the Burj Khalifa. This completely, fundamentally changes the nature of the entire trip. That is exactly the goal, Dylan. Also, cancel the private sunset desert safari. Cancel the private luxury yacht. Cancel the VIP fast-track tickets to the Burj Khalifa. Cancel the airport limo transfers. Book them a standard shared shuttle bus from the airport, and leave the rest of their itinerary completely blank. They can figure out their own cheap activities. I could clearly hear Dylan breathing heavily on the phone. Mason, I have to ask. Are you okay? This is a complete, savage gutting of a $26,000 luxury experience. They are going to have a very, very rough time. My family circumstances dramatically changed, I said, and so did the budget for their anniversary gift. All right, Dylan sighed deeply. With all these extreme cancellations and downgrades, you are getting a massive refund credited back to your account. We are talking over $18,000. Do you want me to just refund it directly to your corporate card? I looked at the beautiful Chicago skyline out my office window. I thought about Isabella's smug, victorious smile. I thought about my dad telling me I didn't deserve a seat at the table. No, Dylan, I said, a genuine, wicked smile forming on my face. I want you to use that $18,000 to book a solo trip for me. Find the most exclusive, hyper-luxurious overwater bungalow in the Maldives. Book it for the exact same dates they are sweating in Dubai. Dylan actually laughed out loud. A revenge upgrade. Mason, I will get you a St. Regis villa that will absolutely blow your mind. The sheer panic radiating through the phone was palpable. Standing in my quiet, climate-controlled office overlooking the Chicago River, I listened to my father completely lose his mind at the Emirates check-in counter at O'Hare. Just a few weeks prior, he had sat in his comfortable living room armchair and coldly told me that Isabella deserved my seat on a $26,000 luxury vacation. Now, the reality of my retaliation was hitting him square in the jaw. Mason, I am not playing games with you, my dad growled into the phone. The background noise of the busy airport terminal seemed to amplify his rising desperation. You need to call your travel agent right now and fix this. The agent here is telling us we are booked in basic economy. Group 6 boarding. We don't even have assigned seats together. We are scattered all over the back of the plane. That sounds like a logistical issue for the 4 of you to figure out, I said, my voice as smooth and unbothered as glass. Maybe Isabella can use her incredible charm to ask someone to trade seats with her. Do not test me, Mason, my dad barked. I am your father. I demand you fix this. If you do not upgrade these tickets back to first class this instant, I will write you out of my will. Your entire inheritance will go to Carter. Do you understand me? I actually laughed. A real, genuine laugh that bubbled up from the depths of my chest. Keep the inheritance, Dad. Give it all to Carter. He is going to need it to pay off Isabella's credit card bills anyway. I make my own money. I built my own life. And I certainly do not need your money dangling over my head like a threat anymore. I could hear a scuffle on the other end of the line. Suddenly, Carter's voice replaced my dad's. Carter sounded completely frantic, borderline hysterical. Mason, bro, come on. Stop messing around. Isabella is literally crying by the luggage scale. She bought 3 new designer suitcases for this trip. They are telling us we have to pay extra for checked bags because basic economy doesn't cover luxury luggage allowances. We don't have the cash for that. We are supposed to be flying first class. This is supposed to be our early honeymoon preview. Carter, I said firmly, shutting down his whining immediately. You called me selfish. You told me I always needed to be the center of attention. Well, I am completely removing myself from the center of your attention. You guys wanted a family bonding trip without me. You got it. Enjoy the 14-hour flight in the middle seat. Mason, please, Carter begged, his voice cracking. Have a safe flight, I said softly, and I ended the call. I set my phone face down on my desk and let out a long, slow exhale. For the first time in 32 years, my shoulders dropped. The chronic tension in my neck, the constant, buzzing anxiety of trying to please a family that viewed me as a walking wallet, simply vanished. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel remorseful. I felt incredibly, undeniably free. They had made their bed, and now they had to fly 14 hours in it. 14 hours later, while I was peacefully sleeping in my own bed in Chicago, my family landed in the blistering, unforgiving heat of Dubai. I didn't have to be there to know exactly how it went down. My mom later filled me in on every excruciating detail. They staggered off the plane, exhausted, stiff, and miserable from sitting in the cramped economy section near the rear lavatories. Isabella's carefully applied airport makeup had completely melted off her face. They hauled their heavy bags through customs, fully expecting to see a man in a sharp black suit holding a sleek iPad with their name on it, ready to escort them to a private, air-conditioned limousine. Instead, they walked out into the chaotic arrivals hall and found absolutely nothing. Carter furiously checked the stripped-down itinerary I had sent to his email right before they took off. It says here we have a shared shuttle bus transfer, he read aloud, his face pale. They dragged their luggage out into the 100-degree heat and waited 45 minutes for a crowded, poorly ventilated shuttle bus packed with budget backpackers. But the real shock came when the bus finally dropped them off at their hotel. They were not pulling up to the iconic, sail-shaped Burj Al Arab. They were not greeted by bellhops offering cold towels and sparkling water. The shuttle dropped them on a noisy, congested street deep in the Dara district. The hotel was a basic, slightly run-down 3-star establishment wedged between a discount electronics store and a loud wholesale market. According to my mom, Isabella stood on the cracked pavement, staring up at the neon sign of the cheap hotel, her mouth hanging wide open in sheer horror. "This cannot be right," Isabella shrieked, frantically pulling out her phone. "Carter, this is a budget motel. Where is the infinity pool? Where is the private beach? I cannot post pictures of this on my social media." Carter tried to calm her down, but things only got worse when they checked in. They were handed the keys to 2 standard, tiny rooms with twin beds and views of a brick alleyway. There was no room service. There were no plush robes. It was the exact opposite of the glamorous influencer lifestyle Isabella had been bragging about to all her friends back in Chicago for the last 2 months. That evening, the harsh reality of the downgraded trip truly set in. Carter opened the itinerary to see what time their private yacht cruise was scheduled for the next morning. He scrolled down the page, his eyes widening in pure panic. "Everything is gone," Carter whispered, showing the screen to my dad. "The yacht is canceled. The private desert safari is canceled. The VIP dinner at the Burj Khalifa is canceled. Mason canceled every single activity. We just have the hotel rooms and the return flights." My dad, who had been insisting that Mason would eventually cave and fix everything, finally realized the absolute finality of the situation. They were stranded in an expensive foreign city with no luxury amenities, no VIP access, and no Mason to pull out his corporate credit card to save the day. The $26,000 dream had evaporated into the desert heat, leaving them with exactly what they deserved. While my family was sweating profusely in a tiny hotel room in Dara, I was stepping off a private seaplane into the crystal-clear, turquoise waters of the Maldives. Dylan, my travel agent, had completely outdone himself. The $18,000 in refunded money from the canceled Dubai luxury experiences had secured me a week at the St. Regis Maldives Vomuli Resort. As I walked down the wooden pier, the warm tropical breeze hitting my face, I was greeted by a personal butler named Christian. He handed me an ice-cold, lemongrass-scented towel and a glass of vintage champagne. "Welcome to paradise, Mr. Mason." Christian smiled warmly. "Your overwater villa is ready." My jaw practically hit the wooden floorboards when I walked into my villa. It was massive. It featured a private infinity pool that blended seamlessly into the Indian Ocean, a glass floor to watch the vibrant marine life swimming below, and a king-sized bed facing the open water. This was the exact level of luxury I had originally planned to give my parents. Sitting on my private deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange, I realized I was finally giving that luxury to the only person who actually earned it, myself. On my second night, I was sitting at the resort's exclusive overwater bar, sipping a rare bourbon, when I heard a familiar voice call my name. I turned around and nearly dropped my glass. It was Lincoln, the CEO of my firm back in Chicago. He was standing there in a tailored linen suit, looking completely relaxed. "Mason? I thought that was you." Lincoln smiled, walking over and shaking my hand firmly. "What are the odds? I come to the Maldives every year to disconnect. Are you celebrating the big promotion?" "You could say that, Lincoln." I smiled, gesturing for him to take the seat next to me. We ended up sitting at that bar for 3 hours. We didn't just talk about corporate portfolios or asset management. We talked about life. I ended up sharing a heavily sanitized version of why I was there alone. I mentioned establishing difficult boundaries with family and learning to prioritize my own well-being. Lincoln listened intently, nodding his head. "You know, Mason," he said, raising his glass, "in business, we instantly cut ties with toxic assets that drain our resources without providing any return on investment. People often forget that the exact same rule applies to personal life. You are a brilliant manager. You have a massive future at the firm. Never let anyone, not even family, make you feel like you are just a tool to be used. Cheers to knowing your worth." Clinking glasses with my CEO in the middle of the Indian Ocean was the ultimate validation. It was the exact opposite of sitting in my dad's living room being called selfish. I wasn't an ATM. I was a respected, valued professional. Before I went to sleep that night, I walked out onto my private deck. The moon was reflecting off the calm water. I pulled out my phone, snapped a simple, beautifully framed photo of my bare feet propped up on the wooden railing with the glowing infinity pool and the ocean in the background. I opened Instagram. I didn't write a long, petty paragraph. I didn't mention Dubai. I just typed one single sentence. "Sometimes you have to choose yourself." I hit post, knowing full well that Carter, Isabella, and my Uncle Gabriel would see it immediately. Then, I turned my phone on airplane mode, threw it on the plush armchair, and went to sleep to the sound of the ocean. I kept my phone on airplane mode for most of the week, only connecting to the resort's Wi-Fi occasionally to check vital work emails. But when I did log on, I couldn't help but peek at the absolute circus unfolding on social media. Isabella was spiraling completely out of control. Her Instagram feed, which was supposed to be a carefully curated gallery of luxury Dubai aesthetics, had devolved into a chaotic, passive-aggressive complaint board. She was posting endless Instagram stories from the back of crowded public transit buses and from the tiny balcony of their Dara hotel. One photo showed a blurry, zoomed-in shot of the Burj Khalifa from miles away, blocked by power lines. The caption read, "Not everything is as glamorous as people promise. Sometimes family lets you down when you need them most. Hashtag travel fails, hashtag expectation versus reality, hashtag heartbroken." Another post was a selfie of her and Carter sitting in a cheap food court. Carter looked utterly exhausted, his eyes carrying dark, heavy bags. Isabella looked furious. 3-hour wait just to get into a basic mall restaurant because someone canceled our VIP dining reservations without telling us. Being the bigger person is so exhausting. It was pure, unadulterated projection. She was trying to frame herself as the innocent victim of a cruel prank, but anyone with an ounce of common sense could see right through it. Meanwhile, my single, serene photo of the Maldives infinity pool was racking up likes and comments from my friends and colleagues. The stark contrast between our trips was doing exactly what I hoped it would do. It was forcing my parents to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, locked in a cheap hotel with the real Isabella. Without the distracting buffer of luxury suites, private chefs, and unlimited room service, Isabella's true, toxic personality was on full display. My mom later confessed that the entire week in Dubai was a living nightmare. Isabella complained incessantly about the brutal heat. She yelled at Carter for not having enough money on his debit card to buy her expensive dinners. She refused to walk anywhere, demanding they pay for premium taxis they couldn't afford. She treated my mom like a personal servant, asking her to iron her dresses and run down to the lobby for extra towels. The breaking point for my parents was watching how Isabella treated Carter. For years, my dad had coddled Carter, protecting him from the harsh realities of the world. Now, he was forced to watch his golden boy get verbally berated in public by a woman who only cared about what he could buy her. Carter was miserable, stressed, and completely broke. By day 4 of their miserable trip, the facade had completely crumbled. The sweet, polite girl who had charmed my dad in the living room back in Chicago was gone. In her place was a demanding, entitled nightmare who threw tantrums when she didn't get her way. My dad, who valued respect and discipline above all else, was rapidly losing his patience. The stage was perfectly set for the final catastrophic meltdown. On my 5th day in the Maldives, I was enjoying a deep tissue massage at the overwater spa when my phone vibrated in my locker. I checked it afterward and saw a long, desperate text message from my mom. "Mason, I am so incredibly sorry. You were right about everything. Isabella just lost her mind at the mall. Your father is furious. I just want to go home. Please call me when you can." I didn't call her back. I let her sit with the uncomfortable reality she had helped create. But weeks later, when the dust finally settled, Carter practically gave me a play-by-play of the monumental disaster that occurred at the Dubai Mall. The Dubai Mall is one of the largest, most extravagant shopping centers in the entire world. It is a playground for the ultra-rich. Isabella had dragged the family there, demanding they spend their final day window shopping at high-end designer boutiques. They walked past the massive indoor aquarium and approached the luxury car displays. Isabella stopped dead in her tracks in front of a gleaming, brand-new Porsche 911 on display in the mall promenade. She grabbed Carter's arm, her eyes wide with a manic, demanding intensity. "Carter," she announced loudly, not caring who heard her, "this trip has been an absolute disaster. We have been staying in a literal dump. We haven't done anything fun. My friends back home are laughing at me. If we are seriously flying home in economy class tomorrow, you owe me a massive apology." Carter looked around nervously, noticing the affluent shoppers staring at them. "I know, babe, I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you when we get back to Chicago." "Yes, you will," Isabella snapped, pointing directly at the luxury vehicle. "You are going to buy me a Porsche. That is the only way you can possibly make this right. Your brother makes a massive salary. He can co-sign the loan for you, or you can just have your dad cash out another retirement account. I don't care how you do it, but I deserve a Porsche for putting up with your cheap family this entire week." The absolute sheer audacity of her demand hung in the air. She was standing in the middle of a mall in the Middle East, screaming at a guy who worked at a cell phone kiosk, demanding a $100,000 sports car as compensation for a free vacation. My dad, who had been quietly walking a few steps behind them, finally snapped. The retired military officer, the man who demanded ultimate respect, had reached his absolute limit. "Isabella, that is enough," my dad roared, his voice echoing loudly across the marble floors of the mall. "You will not speak to my son that way, and you will certainly not demand vehicles we cannot afford. You have done nothing but complain, whine, and disrespect this family since the moment we landed. Mason was right about you. You are nothing but an entitled brat." Isabella spun around, her face twisting into an ugly sneer. "Don't you yell at me. You guys promised me luxury. You promised me first class. You are all a bunch of broke frauds." She stormed out of the mall, leaving Carter standing there utterly humiliated, and my parents staring at each other in horrified realization. In that single, explosive moment in front of the Porsche, the illusion was completely shattered. My dad finally saw the monster he had aggressively forced into my seat. I returned to Chicago feeling like a completely different person. I was deeply tanned, incredibly rested, and carrying a new, unbreakable sense of self-respect. My phone had several missed calls and voicemails from my parents, but I took my time settling back into my house and returning to work before I even considered responding. I was no longer on their schedule. Eventually, 2 weeks after we all got back, I agreed to meet my dad. I refused to go to their house. We met at a neutral location, a quiet, upscale coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. When I walked through the glass doors, I spotted my dad sitting in a corner booth. He looked surprisingly old. The rigid, imposing military posture that usually defined him seemed to have completely deflated. When he saw me approach the table, he immediately stood up, offering a formal, stiff courtesy that felt strangely foreign between us. "Mason," he said quietly, pulling out the chair opposite him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." I nodded, taking the seat, and placed my black coffee on the table. I didn't say anything. The burden of beginning this conversation rested entirely on his shoulders. He stared down at his hands for a long moment, turning a sugar packet over and over. "I owe you a massive apology, Mason. What we did with the Dubai trip was completely wrong. I see that now, very clearly." I looked at him, keeping my expression neutral. "Why did you do it, Dad? I really need to know. Why did you think it was perfectly acceptable to take something I bled for and hand it to a stranger?" He let out a heavy, rattling sigh. "I could give you a dozen cheap excuses. I could say I wanted to welcome Isabella into the family. I could say I genuinely thought you would understand because you are always so capable, always so independent. But the raw truth is much harder for me to admit." He finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "I have not been fair to you for a very, very long time, Mason. I have always heavily favored Carter. I did it because Carter struggled. Carter was weak. He constantly needed support, and I felt like it was my duty as a father to protect him from his own failures." "And me?" I asked, my voice tight. "You?" My dad shook his head sadly. "You were strong. You never needed me. You paid for your own college. You built a brilliant career. You exceeded every single expectation I ever had. And instead of being incredibly proud of you, I foolishly took you for granted. Worse than that, I resented you for it. I held you to an impossibly high standard, and when you easily met it, it made me feel completely unnecessary as a father. So I punished you for your independence." Hearing him say the words out loud was absolutely staggering. I had felt this exact dynamic playing out for my entire life, but I never, in my wildest dreams, expected a proud, stubborn military veteran to openly acknowledge his own toxic resentment. "Do you have any idea how much it physically hurt me?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "When you looked me in the eye and said Isabella deserved to go more than I did?" "I do now," he said, his eyes actually glistening with unshed tears. "I do not expect you to forgive me today. I don't even know if you can ever forgive me. But I want you to know that I fully see what I have done, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry." The fallout from the Dubai trip completely obliterated Carter's relationship with Isabella. The stress, the public humiliation at the mall, and the stark realization of her aggressive materialism were simply too much to ignore. 2 weeks after they returned to Chicago, Carter packed up his things, left her apartment, and officially called off the engagement. Predictably, Isabella did not take the rejection with any grace. She completely lost her mind. First, she flatly refused to return the massive diamond engagement ring. She boldly claimed it was a legally binding gift and that she was keeping it as compensation for wasting her time. Carter was a wreck, knowing that our mom had pawned her irreplaceable family heirloom to fund that exact ring. When Carter threatened to get the police involved, Isabella decided to escalate her crazy behavior. She found my phone number and actually had the sheer audacity to call me while I was sitting at my desk at work. "Mason," she barked as soon as I answered, completely dropping the sweet, innocent voice she used to use. You completely ruined my life. You intentionally sabotaged my dream vacation, and you manipulated Carter into leaving me. Isabella, I am currently working, I said smoothly. Do you have a point? Or are you just calling to complain? I am calling to demand my compensation, she shrieked. Dealing with your toxic, cheap family for the last 6 months was a full-time job. I deserve a salary for the emotional damage you all caused me. You are rich. You owe me $20,000 for ruining my engagement and destroying my mental health in Dubai. If you don't wire me the money, I am going to post everything about you online and ruin your corporate reputation. I actually had to pull the phone away from my ear because I was laughing so hard. The sheer, blinding entitlement was almost impressive. Isabella, listen to me very carefully, I said, my tone turning to absolute ice. You are not getting a single dime from me, ever. Keep the ring if you want, but know that it was bought with pawn shop money. If you ever contact me, my brother, or my parents again, I won't just block you. I will hire a corporate lawyer so aggressive and so relentless that you will spend the next 10 years buried in harassment lawsuits. I will make sure your wages at that little boutique are garnished until you are completely bankrupt. Do we fully understand each other? The line was dead silent. I could hear her breathing heavily, processing the fact that her empty threats had just met a solid brick wall. You are a monster, she finally hissed. Have a great life in economy class, I replied, and I hung up the phone. I immediately blocked her number, blocked her on all social media platforms, and advised my family to do the exact same. That was the absolute last time I ever heard her voice. The parasite had officially been evicted from our lives. 6 months passed, and the dynamic of my entire life fundamentally shifted. The disastrous Dubai trip turned out to be the absolute best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it forced the poison out of the wound. I started going to therapy every Thursday evening. I needed a professional to help me untangle decades of deep-rooted, people-pleasing behavior. I realized that my obsession with giving my family expensive gifts was just a desperate, unhealthy attempt to purchase their unconditional love. With my therapist's guidance, I learned how to establish ironclad boundaries. I stopped automatically saying yes to every single request for financial help. I learned that my value as a human being was not tied to my bank account or my ability to bail people out of trouble. The most surprising change, however, came from Carter. Losing Isabella and witnessing the absolute destruction of his family's trust seemed to finally wake him up from his 35-year slumber. He realized that the safety net was officially gone. For the first time in his life, he didn't run to my dad for a bailout. Carter quit his dead-end job at the mall kiosk and enrolled in an intensive, 6-month vocational training program for HVAC repair. He worked grueling daytime shifts as an apprentice, getting his hands dirty, and studied at night. He started making real, honest money. One evening, he showed up unannounced on my front porch. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. He handed me a white envelope. "What is this?" I asked, opening the envelope to find a check for $2,000. "It's the money you gave me for rent last year," Carter said, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I'm paying you back, Mason, for everything. I'm paying off Mom's pawn ticket first to get her necklace back, and then I'm going to pay you back for every single time you bailed me out. I was a terrible brother. I took complete advantage of you, and I am so deeply sorry." I looked at the check, and then I looked at my brother. I didn't tear up the check. I folded it and put it in my pocket, because holding him accountable was the only way we could ever build a real relationship. "Thank you, Carter," I said, stepping aside. "Do you want to come inside for a beer?" It was a slow, incredibly messy process. My dad still occasionally slipped into his old, rigid habits of giving unsolicited advice. My mom still struggled to voice her own opinions without looking at my dad for permission. Carter still had moments of intense frustration with his new, difficult career, and I still had to actively fight the urge to open my wallet whenever there was a minor family crisis. But the crucial difference was that we were finally honest with each other. There were no more secrets, no more hidden resentment. We caught ourselves and we held each other accountable. We were finally starting to act like a real, functional family. For my parents' 41st wedding anniversary, we didn't go to Dubai. There were no first-class tickets, no seven-star hotels, and absolutely no private yachts. Instead, Carter and I split the cost of renting a modest, rustic wooden cabin on a quiet lake up in Wisconsin, just a 3-hour drive from Chicago. We loaded up our cars with groceries, board games, and cheap beer. The four of us spent the long weekend entirely disconnected from the outside world. We grilled hot dogs on the back deck. We drank coffee on the wooden dock, watching the morning mist roll off the lake. My dad and Carter spent hours struggling to fix a broken fishing rod, laughing when they completely tangled the line. My mom wore her grandmother's vintage gold necklace, which Carter had proudly redeemed from the pawn shop, and she looked happier and more relaxed than I had ever seen her. One evening, as the sun was setting over the water, my dad walked over to where I was sitting by the fire pit. He handed me a cold beer and sat down in the Adirondack chair next to me. We didn't say anything for a long time, just listening to the sound of the crickets and the crackling wood. If you are watching this and you recognize these toxic patterns in your own life, if you are the dependable workhorse, the invisible ATM, the one who is always expected to sacrifice while the golden child gets a free pass, you need to hear this. You cannot buy respect. You cannot purchase unconditional love. Sometimes, the most loving, powerful thing you can do for yourself and for your family is to firmly plant your feet, look them in the eye, and say no. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. And for those of you who made it to the very end of this video, you are the real ones. If you are hearing my voice right now, drop a W in the comments. W stands for winner. That is our secret code. It's the mark of the 1% Club, the incredibly awesome, dedicated viewers who stick around to the very end and truly understand the message. It lets me know who my real supporters are. Please give this video a like, hit that follow button, and turn on notifications so we can continue hanging out and sharing these crazy life stories together. Stay strong, know your worth, and I'll see you in the next one.